Hello, this is Melissa with the Stamping Ninja. Today I have a beautiful seaside card for you today. This one is made with the new stamp bundle Seaside Wishes, and it comes with dies and a matching hybrid embossing folder. So for this one, the supplies that you will need are listed below this video, but I'll also go over them here real quick. You are going to need a piece of basic beige that measures 7 by 8.5, and it is scored at 3.5. A piece of basic white cardstock that measures 3 1/4 by 8 1/4. That is for the inside of our card. A piece of crumb cake that measures 3 1/4 by 8 1/4. Piece of Lagoon that measures 3 1/8 by 8 1/8. Need another piece of basic beige that measures about 4.5 by 5.5. A piece of scrap of the basic beige to stamp your starfish on. A scrap piece of wild wheat cardstock and a scrap piece of crumb cake cardstock. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to burnish our score line here with our bone folder. Get that nice and crisp to create our card base. Make sure that doesn't want to lay down just yet, so I'm going to do both sides here. There we go. So that one's nice and flat, and I'm going to set this to the side for just a minute. I'm not going to use it just yet. I want to keep it out of the way of the camera. You're going to need your Lagoon cardstock, the one that is 3 1/8 by 8 1/8, and we are going to emboss it. And what we're embossing with is this huge embossing folder called So Swirly, and it is on page 129 of the catalog. Just to give you an idea how large this is. This is the regular size embossing folder that we use, so it's quite a bit larger. It measures 6 inches by 8.5 inches. So it's great for slimline cards. So just gonna put your cardstock in there, and it is not a 3D embossing folder, so it's very thin. So you'll have to run it through with one of your plates on the bottom, put this in, and a plate on top. I've already run mine through. So when you're all through with it, it should look like this. Some nice, kind of looks like ocean waves, so that's why I chose that. So we're going to adhere that piece, our emboss piece, to our crumb cake piece. And I'm using multi-purpose liquid glue. It is my favorite by far, because when I glue something, I like to make sure that it's nice and straight and even on all 4 sides. And when I put this glue on here, it gives me time, oops, not like that, time to move it around a little bit so that I can get it nice and even before it settles in, unlike when you use the Stampin' Seal. So move that one a little too much. Usually it's a little smoother than that, but I think you get the point. So now that that's on there, we're going to use our linen thread. Mine's a little bit curly, so I'm just going to pull on it to straighten out a bit. We're going to wrap it around the bottom here about 2 times, and it's about 1 inch from the bottom. So I'll wrap it around once, wrap it around twice here. Yeah, I'm just going to cut it. I didn't measure the length of the linen thread. So I'm just giving me enough here to tie a bow. Straighten that out a little bit. And I'm doing it over here on the left side of my piece. Well, helps if I tie it right. All right, so a little tie here. And then I'm just gonna make a bow. It never fails when you're on camera. I always have fat finger syndrome, so it never works out too well. There, doesn't have to be perfect, but I am gonna straighten it out a little bit here. It's going to be covered by our sentiment, but I just want to make sure that it looks good before I trim my ends. So I'm making sure that it's not hanging off the edge here or at the bottom here. This one's a little bit long, so I'm going to pull it a little bit. There. Straighten it out a little bit. Mine's a little twisted, but that's all right. All right, so we're going to flip that over, and we're going to adhere this to our card base. So again, I'm using my multi-purpose liquid glue. And put it back on our basic beige card base. Like so. All right, just going to trim these ends here. Make that one a little long. There, as long as they're still fitting our envelope there. All right, so that is the basis of the front of our card. Now we got to do all this fun stuff here on top. So again, I'm going to set this to the side. Next, you're going to grab your hybrid embossing folder and this very large die right here. And that scrap piece of basic beige that I said measures about 4.5 and 5.5. This is how we're going to make our little sand dollars. So we're going to open this up, and the side that says Stampin' Up on it, I'm going to put to my left. And I'm going to take my Versamark ink pad. I'm going to ink this side up really well over my sand dollars. And I'll show you why I'm doing this here in a minute. So ink that up really well. I'm going to put this goes upside down, so your little cut line here should be on the top. And you just place it right over those 3 sand dollars, and you can see it doesn't move. It's kind of got a little groove there where it sits in place. So this is going to go on top of those. And then you're just going to close that right side up, and you're going to run that through your cut and emboss machine. And I have already done that, so I have a set, and I'll show you. This was my outline there of the ones that I cut out. So I have my 3 sand dollars here. They all cut out at the same time, which is great. I love those hybrid embossing folders. But the reason that I use the Versamark is because it gives you a little bit more definition. And even though this is just a plain color, the beige, I don't know if you can see the difference in these two. The one, I'll try to put it up closer here. The one on the right, I used Versamark, and the one on the left, I just ran it through plain with no Versamark on there. So you can see that it has a little bit more detail with a slightly darker color, where this one is just kind of plain. So that's why I like using the Versamark. So we have our sand dollars, and next we're going to kind of dirty them up a little bit, make them look more real. So you're going to need your Crumb Cake ink pad and a sponge dauber. I have mine labeled, so this one's the Crumb Cake. I'm just going to ink these up real quick, and I'm doing it very lightly. I'm just going to go on the detail of this sand dollar. So I don't want it to, obviously don't want to color brown, but I want it to have a little bit of dimension and a little bit of color so it stands out. So that's my center part, and then I'm just going to go around the edges just real lightly. Some areas get a little darker sometimes when you do this, but that's okay. That gives it a little bit of character. So just going around the edges. Whoop, like that one got a little bit dark. Like that. And then if I had some areas that were really light, I'm just going to scruff it just a little bit. Like that. So you see the difference? We kind of dirty it up a little bit. So I'm going to do that to the other two as well. color in the sand dollar part here. And then a little bit around the edges. So I really like this set. It's a lot of fun, especially when you live in the desert like I do. You not around the ocean very often, so when you get the opportunity to make your own little ocean scene, it's kind of nice. So just kind of dirtying that up a little bit. There we go. And then the last one, little one. And then just right around the edges. It does take a little bit of time, but I think it's worth it. There we go. So our sand dollars are all scruffy. Okay, and now we are going to move on to our starfish. So for the starfish, you're going to need your other piece of basic beige scrap, your Cajun Craze. Let me move these little sand dollars here so they don't get dirty. Cajun Craze ink pad, and you are going to need your Stampin Spritzer. Mine I labeled it with water so I know what I have inside of it. So we're going to give it a little watercolor look. So I'm going to ink up my starfish here. And before I spritz it, I'm going to stamp off. So I'm going to stamp off my ink, do a practice spray there on the side, and then I'm just going to give a couple little squirts here to the top of that starfish. And then stamp on my paper. So it gives it a nice little watercolor effect, which I thought was pretty neat, considering it's a starfish and it's supposed to be in the water. So making it look authentic. I'm going to do the same thing for the little one. So I'm going to ink it up, going to stamp off, and then I'm going to spritz it. Make sure I can do that so you can see it. Spritz it with my water and stamp. And that's how those starfish are created, actually. Just gonna move this one out of the way. While we have our starfish and the Cajun Craze out, you're gonna take your basic white piece. Since this is for the inside, I didn't show you the inside. The inside, I stamped a starfish right down here in the corner. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that while I have my starfish out. So I'm using the large one. Ink it up. Going to stamp off, and then I'm going to spritz it with my water. And I'm not putting the whole thing on there. I'm just putting about 2/3 of it, probably a little more. There. Stamp that in the corner. That way the inside's not boring. And I left the other part blank so that you can put any sentiment that you want to there. So there's our starfish. And I guess while we're at it, let's just go ahead and put this on the inside of our card. So I'm going to glue this to the inside. That way I don't forget later. I have a habit of doing that. So just put that here out of the way. Oh, I did get that a little crooked. All right. So next you're going to crop out these starfish, and you're also going to need your scrap crumb cake and your scrap wild wheat. You're going to be cropping out some of this seaweed, and you're also going to be cropping out these little bits of, I guess they're coral, little bits of coral. They kind of look like a sand dollar. So you're going to need one each of these in crumb cake, and you're going to need 4 large ones and 1 small one of the seaweed and the wild wheat. So go ahead and crop all of that out. I have already done that, so I'll just grab those real quick. I have my 2 starfish here and all the fun goodies there, my seaweed and my coral. So what we're going to do, bring my card back in here, we are going to adhere all this to the front of the card. I'm going to start with a large one. So I'm just going to apply some glue towards the bottom. And this one's just kind of random. I'm going to stick it right here towards the top. I'm going to hold it just for a minute because with these ridges, you kind of want to make sure you have a good hold on it. And I'm going to take my little one, put a little glue down there towards the bottom, and it's going to go right next to it. I'm just snuggling it right up to the top. So right next to it. And you're going to take another large one. I think it's the same size. Actually, it's about a medium one. I guess it's a little bit smaller. But they're very close in size. And this one's going to go somewhere in this vicinity. It's just a guess. Doesn't have to be perfect, because everything is going to cover them up. We just want them poking out a little bit here and there. All right, so those are on there. We're going to take our small starfish, or sand dollar, I'm calling it starfish, small sand dollar and our large sand dollar, and these small little coral thing, and we're going to adhere these together. So, let's see which side. You just have to figure out which way you want yours to go. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the back of this die cut, maybe. There we go. Doesn't take a whole lot to hold it. And we're just going to stick it on the front like that. Got glue on my fingers. And then I'm going to take a little bit of glue, put it down here on my sand dollar, and a little bit on the top of this one. And I'm going to stick that right on top. That's the large one. Again, these don't have to be perfect. The fingers are a little sticky. Okay, and lastly, we're going to take our little starfish here. The glue is really sticky on my fingers. Okay, a little bit of glue here. And it's going to go right behind this big sand dollar. Just kind of tuck him in there. And I'm just holding it for a minute for it to stick. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to set that to the side, and then we're going to do the other ones. The medium sand dollar, and then this larger piece of coral. Oops. So I'm going to put some glue on the little die cut here. And then stick it right to that sand dollar. So I've gone almost up to the middle. That's how much is covering it. Then we're going to take our grass, or our seaweed rather. Just putting it on the bottom section there. And this is going to go behind it. Just sticking up just a little bit here up at the top. And then we're going to do the same thing with this large one. Just putting glue down here at the bottom. going to go behind here. Somewhere about there. They are overlapping a little bit. I don't know if you can see them. It's just a little bit behind that one. And then lastly, we're going to take our big starfish, put some glue. You can see I goofed up on mine, so I stamped on both sides. Not very uncommon. Figured, why waste my paper? So this guy, I have his little arm here going across the top. And this one's running parallel here with this little die cut. And then this one, of course, is on top. All right. Now we're going to attach those to the card with Stampin Dimensionals. So, I'm going to flip these over. And what I like to do is I like to put my dimensionals where everything is overlapping. That's where I start. So that way I know that they're going to be stuck on there pretty good. Then I just fill in the rest. Just kind of spacing them out so they don't sag anywhere in the middle. And then the same for this one. I'll put it where everything overlaps. I can even put one right there where those two overlap. They'll be hidden. And then one in the middle of my starfish. All right, so I'm going to start with the one at the top, the one with the two sand dollars on it, and peel all these little backs off. And it's going to cover this seaweed just a little bit here, making sure everything fits on the card on the left and the right, and it's not hanging over before I set it in place. So there's that one. And then we're going to put the bottom half on. And it's the same thing with this one. I'm going to make sure nothing is hanging off on the left or the right. Like my little grasses up here. I want to make sure that they don't hang off. And I want to make sure that I have some of it covering the sand dollar up here at the top. So I want to make sure I have room down here for my sentiment. So put that one right in place. And now all of our sand dollars are on there. So for our sentiment, that scrap piece of paper that you have for your wild wheat, you're going to have to cut out a square. And the square is from the Stylish Shapes dies. Boy, that's hard to say. I'm using the second largest square. So this one right here. You can either stamp first and then die cut, or die cut and stamp. I've already made a little square die cut, which I got glue on there. So I'm going to stamp after the fact. And the sentiment that we're using is sometimes the simplest things mean the most. So for that one, I'm just going to use Crumb Cake. It's kind of light. I didn't want to use dark brown. Kind of wanted it to blend with the lighter browns that I'm using here. So I'm just going to ink up my sentiment. And it's going to go right in the center of that square. Perfect. So again, we're going to attach this with dimensionals. So it's going to go over this bow. So I'm just going to put one in each corner, leave the center open. Otherwise it'll stick up too much and not look right. So one dimensional in each corner. and it's going to go right over your bow. I'm just making sure my tie is kind of straight here, because however you put it, that's how it's going to stay. So it's going to go over the center. Just making sure I have it even here on both sides, like so. So you can see just little bits of it sticking out there. And then our final step is to add our embellishments. And for this, I figured the pearls were appropriate. So we're using the flat adhesive-backed pearls. And I'm using 3 of them because I like to use an odd number. Make it more symmetrical, I guess, to me. So I'm putting a small one up here at the top. And I'm going to use another small one. They are hard to pick up with this take your pick tool, though. I will say that. Probably better off just using my fingers because they're big enough. So I'm going to put one over here and to kind of balance it out. I usually like to do a triangle. So I have these 2 sides. If I put one down here, it'll balance it nicely. So I'm going to use a large one for that. Just going to go right there in that empty space. And that's it. That is our Seaside Wishes card. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.